I buried my husband on a Tuesday, and by Friday, my own son had locked me out of the life we built together. My name is Dorothy. I'm 63 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. But if you've ever been betrayed by someone you raised, someone you sacrificed everything for, then you'll understand why I need to say this out loud. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from, because what happened to me could happen to anyone, anywhere. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories about people who refuse to stay down, check the description box below. You're going to want to stick around for this one. My husband Richard died of a heart attack in our kitchen. 68 years old, gone in an instant while pouring his morning coffee. We'd been married 41 years. 41 years of building something together, or so I thought. We had one son, Trevor. Our golden boy. Our only child. I'd given up my teaching career when he was born, poured every ounce of myself into raising him right. Richard worked himself half to death so Trevor could go to the best schools, drive the nicest cars, never want for anything. Trevor grew up to be a real estate developer. 37 years old, expensive suits, a wife who looked like she stepped out of a magazine, 2 kids I barely saw. He was busy. Always busy. Too busy to visit his father in the hospital 2 years ago when Richard had his first heart episode. Too busy to call on birthdays. But not too busy to show up at the funeral with his lawyer. The will reading was held in Richard's attorney's office, a stuffy room that smelled like old leather and furniture polish. I sat in a chair that was too big for me, feeling small and hollowed out, still wearing the black dress from the funeral. Trevor sat across from me, checking his phone, his jaw tight with impatience. His wife Amanda wasn't there. Neither were the grandkids. Just Trevor, me, and Mr. Hendricks, Richard's attorney of 20 years. Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat and began reading. The legal language washed over me like cold water. Most of it I expected: accounts, insurance policies, things Richard and I had discussed years ago. Then Mr. Hendricks got to the property. To my beloved wife Dorothy and Brennan, I leave the property located at 1247 Industrial Boulevard, including the building, land, and all contents therein. I blinked. Industrial Boulevard? That was the old neighborhood, the part of town that had been dying slowly for 20 years. I didn't even know Richard owned anything there. Then Mr. Hendricks continued. To my son, Trevor Richard Brennan, I leave the property located at Penthouse 4, the Meridian Towers, 88 West Lakeshore Drive, fully paid, including all furnishings and amenities. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Trevor's head snapped up from his phone. The Meridian? The Meridian Towers. Luxury high-rise overlooking the lake. Penthouses there sold for over $2 million. I'd seen it in the paper just last month. My son's face transformed. The impatience melted into something else. Something that looked like triumph. And the shop? Trevor asked Mr. Hendricks, leaning forward. What's the shop worth? Mr. Hendricks shifted uncomfortably. The property on Industrial Boulevard it's an old auto repair shop. It's been closed for approximately 15 years. The building requires significant repairs. Current assessed value is roughly $85,000, mostly for the land. I watched my son's expression change again. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. 85,000, Trevor repeated slowly. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. An old garage. Dad left you a condemned garage. Trevor, I started, my voice weak. He stood up, straightening his tie. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. He laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made me flinch. The old man finally got something right. Your father loved you, I whispered. Trevor turned on me then, and the look on his face was so full of contempt that I felt it like a physical blow. Did he? Because it looks to me like he left you the trash and gave me the treasure. Finally, an honest assessment of who contributed what to this family. Trevor, please. No, Mom. No more, please. Do you know how much I've resented you both? How much I've hated playing the grateful son while you two lived in that suburban house like middle-class nobodies? Dad was supposed to be smart. He worked in manufacturing for 40 years, and what did he have to show for it? A 3-bedroom ranch and an old truck. But this, he gestured vaguely toward Mr. Hendricks, toward the will, this means he had assets. Real assets. And he was smart enough to give them to someone who'd actually appreciate them. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. "I'm your mother," I managed. "You're a pathetic old fool," Trevor said, and his voice was calm, almost pleasant. That made it worse somehow. "You spent your whole life playing housewife, and what did it get you? A garbage heap in the worst part of town. Don't come crying to me when you can't afford to keep the house. Maybe you can sell that precious garage for scrap." He walked out. Just like that. Mr. Hendricks tried to say something, tried to apologize or explain or something, but I couldn't hear him over the ringing in my ears. If you've ever had someone you love look at you like you're nothing, like you're less than nothing, you know you don't forget it. You don't get over it. It changes something fundamental in who you are. I drove home in a fog. The house felt enormous and empty. Richard's coffee cup was still in the sink, the one from that last morning. I hadn't been able to wash it. Now I picked it up with shaking hands and threw it against the wall. It shattered into a dozen pieces, and I stood there among the shards, crying for the first time since the funeral. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Trevor's words over and over. Pathetic old fool. My son. The baby I'd held, the child I'd comforted through nightmares, the teenager I'd defended, the man I'd been proud of despite his distance. That was what he really thought of me. By morning, something had hardened inside me. Maybe it was the shock wearing off. Maybe it was 41 years of being underestimated finally catching up. But I decided I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to go see this garage, this piece of trash my husband had left me, and then I was going to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of my life. I drove to Industrial Boulevard 3 days after the will reading. It was a gray Saturday morning, threatening rain. The neighborhood was worse than I remembered. Empty storefronts, cracked sidewalks, chain-link fences around vacant lots. The kind of place where hope had packed up and moved to the suburbs 20 years ago. Number 1247 was at the end of the block, a squat brick building with a rusted metal roof. The windows were so dirty I couldn't see through them. The old sign was still up, barely, Brennan's Auto Repair in faded red letters. I hadn't known Richard owned this. Hadn't known he'd ever worked here. In 41 years of marriage, he'd never mentioned it. I sat in my car for a long time, looking at the building. A decrepit auto shop. That was my inheritance. My worth, according to my husband and my son. Finally, I got out. The key Mr. Hendricks had given me was old brass, worn smooth with use. It fit into the padlock on the front door like it had been waiting for me. The lock was stiff, but it opened. The door groaned on hinges that hadn't moved in years. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me first. Motor oil, dust, and something else. Something metallic and old. It was dark, just weak gray light filtering through the filthy windows. I fumbled along the wall until I found a switch. Overhead fluorescent lights flickered, buzzed, and then came on, bathing everything in harsh white light. And that's when I saw it. The shop was bigger than it looked from outside. High ceilings with exposed beams, concrete floors stained with decades of oil and grease, old equipment covered in dust sheets like ghosts. There was a hydraulic lift in the center, an ancient thing that looked like it hadn't been used since the 90s. Tool benches lined the walls, covered in layers of grime. A small office area in the back, behind a window of cloudy glass. But that wasn't what made me freeze in the doorway. Against the far wall, covered with a heavy canvas tarp, were shapes. Large rectangular shapes, stacked carefully, precisely. Maybe a dozen of them, maybe more. My heart started beating faster for reasons I couldn't name yet. I walked across the shop slowly, my footsteps echoing. The building was silent except for the buzz of those fluorescent lights. I reached the tarp and hesitated. Something in me knew that whatever was under there mattered. That it would change things. I pulled the canvas away. Underneath were paintings. Huge paintings, in ornate frames, stacked against the wall like dominoes. I pulled the tarp off completely, coughing in the cloud of dust it released. Then I stood there, staring. They were beautiful. Old, clearly old, oil paintings of landscapes and portraits and still lives. The kind of art you see in museums behind velvet ropes. Even I could tell they were valuable, and I didn't know anything about art. My hands were shaking as I moved to the next stack. More paintings. And the next, antique furniture, delicate pieces wrapped in protective padding. A carved mahogany desk. Chairs with needlepoint seats. A grandfather clock, stopped at 3:17. In the corner, I found wooden crates. I pried one open with a crowbar hanging nearby. Inside, wrapped in yellowed newspaper from 1952, were silver pieces. Candlesticks, serving trays, tea sets. Tarnished but real, heavy in my hands. I sat down hard on the concrete floor, surrounded by treasures, and tried to understand. Richard. My Richard, who'd worked as a manufacturing supervisor, who'd driven a 15-year-old truck, who'd complained about the price of groceries. Richard had owned all of this. Had hidden all of this, here in this forgotten building, and never said a word. I found the explanation in the office. The room was small, cramped, with a metal desk and filing cabinets. Everything was covered in the same thick dust as the shop. I started pulling open drawers, looking for something, anything that would explain what I'd found. The bottom drawer of the desk was locked. I used the crowbar again, not caring that I was destroying the cheap metal lock. Inside were folders, dozens of them, organized with the kind of careful precision that had been my husband's signature. I opened the first one. It was all there. Letters, receipts, certificates of authenticity, appraisal documents. My husband had been a collector. Not just a casual collector, a serious one. For over 40 years, since before we'd even met, Richard had been buying art, antiques, and valuables. Buying them quietly, through estate sales and auctions and private dealers, storing them here, keeping them secret. The appraisal documents were recent, updated within the last year. Someone named Gerald Timmons, professional appraiser, had been through everything. I ran my finger down the total, written in neat handwriting at the bottom of the summary page. Total estimated value, $4.7 million. $4.7 million. I read it again. And again. The number didn't change. My husband, my careful, quiet, frugal husband, had been sitting on a fortune. And he'd left it to me. The Decrepit auto shop. The trash, according to my son. The pathetic inheritance for the pathetic old fool. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It burst out of me, echoing in that dusty office, and once I started I couldn't stop. I laughed until tears ran down my face, until my sides hurt, until the laughter turned into something else. Something harder. Richard had known. He'd known exactly what he was doing. He'd given Trevor the obvious prize, the shiny penthouse that everyone could see and admire. And he'd given me the secret, the real treasure, hidden where no one would think to look. But why? Why the secrecy? Why not just tell me while he was alive? I found the answer in a letter, tucked into the last folder. It was addressed to me, in Richard's careful handwriting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read it. My dearest Dorothy. Asterisk, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. Sorry I didn't have more time. Sorry for all the things I should have said and didn't. Asterisk. Asterisk, you're probably confused right now, standing in this old shop, wondering what the hell I was thinking. Let me explain. Asterisk. Asterisk, I started collecting when I was 23 years old, before I met you. My father had just died and left me a small inheritance. Instead of spending it, I bought my first painting at an estate sale, a small oil painting of a barn, nothing special, but something about it spoke to me. I was hooked. For 45 years, I've been buying pieces, slowly, carefully, always looking for value that others couldn't see. Asterisk. Asterisk, I never told you because I wanted you to have something that was completely yours. Something Trevor couldn't touch, couldn't take, couldn't claim he deserved. I know our son, Dorothy. I know him better than you want to believe. I've seen the way he looks at us, the resentment, the entitlement. I gave him a life without struggle and created a monster. Asterisk. Asterisk the Meridian penthouse is worth $2 million. I bought it as an investment 3 years ago, thinking maybe it would teach him responsibility. But I knew what would really happen. He'd see it as his due, as proof that he was the success and we were the failures. Asterisk. Asterisk this shop, this collection, this is my real legacy. And it's yours, Dorothy. All yours. Sell it, keep it, do whatever you want. But know that it represents every sacrifice I made, every extra shift I worked, every dollar I didn't spend on myself. I did it because I loved you. Because I wanted you to be secure. Because I knew that someday you'd need this. Asterisk. Asterisk Trevor will never know what you have. He'll never understand what his father really accomplished. Let him keep his penthouse and his pride. You have something better. Asterisk. Asterisk I love you. I've always loved you. I'm sorry I couldn't give you 41 more years. Asterisk. Yours always. Richard. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. I sat in that office for a long time, surrounded by file folders and secrets, and felt something shift inside me. Richard had seen our son clearly. Had seen the contempt, the greed, the cruelty, and had planned for it. He'd protected me in the only way he knew how. He'd given me power. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. I spent the rest of that day going through everything. Taking pictures, making lists, organizing the appraisal documents. The collection was extensive, 18 major paintings by known artists, dozens of smaller works, furniture from the 18th and 19th centuries, silver, porcelain, even jewelry in a small safe I found bolted to the floor in the office. Some pieces I recognized from pictures in the folders. A landscape by a Hudson River school painter, worth $380,000 according to the appraisal. A portrait by a minor French impressionist, $290,000. A complete set of Chippendale chairs, $150,000. It was real. It was all real. By the time I locked up the shop that evening, I had a plan forming. Not fully formed yet, just the skeleton of an idea, but it was there. I'd been dismissed, discarded, called pathetic by my own child. Richard had given me the tools for revenge, whether he'd meant to or not. The question was how far I was willing to go. I drove home as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. I felt different than I had that morning. Stronger. Harder. I thought about Trevor's face when he'd called me a fool, the satisfaction in his voice when he told me I got the trash. If you've ever wanted revenge, really wanted it, you know it feels like a living thing inside you. It grows, it demands feeding, it changes how you see the world. Everything becomes about the plan, about the moment when you'll show them who you really are. I was 63 years old, and I was just getting started. I didn't contact Trevor. I wanted to call him and scream about what I'd found, about how wrong he was. But something stopped me. Maybe it was Richard's letter, the warning about our son. Maybe it was my own pride. Or maybe I was starting to understand that revenge isn't a single moment. It's a process, and rushing it would ruin everything. Instead, I spent the next 2 weeks learning. I contacted Gerald Timmons, the appraiser whose name was on all the documents. He was a small man in his 70s, with thick glasses and a gentle manner. When I told him I was Richard's widow, his face softened with sympathy. "Your husband was a remarkable collector," he told me over coffee at a diner near the shop. "He had an eye for value that most professionals would envy." Some of the pieces he found. I still don't know how he spotted them. Why did he keep it all secret? I asked. Gerald stirred his coffee thoughtfully. I asked him that once. He said he liked having a world that was just his. Said it kept him sane. He looked at me over his glasses. He also said he was building something for you. That when the time came, you'd know what to do with it. Did he ever mention our son? Something flickered across Gerald's face. Once, he said. He hesitated, then continued. He said he hoped Trevor would surprise him, but he wasn't counting on it. Said he'd given the boy every advantage and watched him squander them all on appearance and ego. So Richard had known. Had seen it all clearly. That made what came next easier somehow. I want to sell it, I told Gerald. All of it. But I want to do it right. He smiled. Then let me help you. The process took time. Gerald brought in specialists, art dealers, auction houses, antique brokers. They came to the shop in expensive cars, these people who moved in a world I'd never even known existed. They examined the paintings under special lights, traced the provenance of the furniture, tested the silver and appraised the jewelry. The consensus was that Richard's collection, sold properly through the right channels, could bring in $5 to $6 million. Maybe more. You're a wealthy woman, Mrs. Brennan, one of the dealers told me. She was young, mid-30s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. You could sell everything at auction and retire anywhere you want. But I didn't want to retire anywhere. I wanted my son to know what he'd thrown away. During those 2 weeks, Trevor called once. Just once. I was at the shop when my phone rang, and I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Mom. His voice was clipped, impatient. I need you to sign some papers for the house. What papers? I'm putting the house on the market. You can't afford to keep it on your own, and the property value is good right now. We'll split the proceeds. The audacity of it stole my breath. That's my home, Trevor. It was Dad's home. You're on the title, but let's be realistic, you can't maintain it alone. I'm trying to help you. He didn't sound like he was trying to help. He sounded like he was checking off a chore. I'll email you the listing agreement. Sign it and send it back. I'm not selling. Mom. His voice took on that patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. What are you going to do? You don't have income. You don't have savings. That garage Dad left you isn't going to keep the lights on. I'll figure it out. He sighed, long and exaggerated. Fine. Struggle then. But when you can't make the property taxes and they foreclose, don't come crying to me. I tried to help. He hung up. I stood there in the shop, surrounded by millions of dollars in art and antiques, and smiled. The Meridian Towers was exclusive enough that you couldn't just walk into the building. There was a doorman, security cameras, the whole production. But I'd raised Trevor. I knew his patterns, his habits. I knew that every Sunday morning, he met his financial advisor at the rooftop restaurant for brunch. It was his ritual, his way of feeling important. So 3 weeks after the will reading on a Sunday morning, I got dressed in my best outfit, a navy suit I'd bought for Richard's funeral and hadn't worn since, and drove downtown. I paid for parking in the visitor garage, rode the elevator to the top floor, and walked into the restaurant like I had every right to be there. The hostess tried to stop me. Ma'am, this is a private. I'm here to see my son, I said firmly. Trevor Brennan. He's expecting me. He wasn't, of course. But I moved past her before she could question it, scanning the room. The restaurant was all glass and steel, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Expensive. Exclusive. The kind of place Trevor loved because other people couldn't afford it. I spotted him at a corner table. He was with a man in a golf shirt, papers spread between them, deep in conversation. Amanda wasn't there. She never was. Trevor's wife had learned early that his business came first. I walked straight to his table. Trevor looked up, and for a second, I saw pure shock on his face. Then it hardened into annoyance. Mom? What are you doing here? We need to talk. I'm in a meeting. He gestured to the man across from him, who was watching with uncomfortable curiosity. This isn't a good time. Make time, I said, and my voice was steady. Calm. I wasn't the crying woman from the will reading anymore. Something in my tone must have registered because Trevor's jaw tightened. He turned to his advisor. Give us a minute, Jeff. Jeff gathered his papers quickly and retreated to the bar. Trevor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking at me like I was an inconvenience. What? I wanted to see the penthouse, I said. The inheritance. The treasure, as you called it. Are you serious? He glanced around, lowering his voice. You came all the way downtown to show me. Mom, I don't have time for. Show me, I repeated, or I'll make a scene in your fancy restaurant. Your choice. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then he stood abruptly, threw his napkin on the table. Fine. 5 minutes. The penthouse was on the 42nd floor. Trevor used a special key for the elevator, and we rode up in silence. The doors opened directly into his apartment. No hallway, no other units. Just straight into a sprawling open space with windows on 3 sides. It was stunning. I'll give him that. Modern furniture, hardwood floors, a kitchen with appliances I couldn't even identify. The views were breathtaking. The lake stretching to the horizon, the city spreading out below like a toy model. Satisfied? Trevor asked, his arms still crossed. It's beautiful, I said honestly. I walked to the windows, looked out at the water. Your father bought this for you 3 years ago. What? I turned to face him. The penthouse. Richard bought it as an investment property 3 years ago. He put it in the trust specifically to give to you. Did you think he just magically had a $2 million apartment lying around? Trevor's face went red. So what? He still gave it to me. He obviously thought I deserved. He thought it would teach you responsibility, I interrupted. He thought maybe if you had something of real value, you'd appreciate what he'd built. I paused. He was wrong. Get out. You called me a pathetic old fool, I continued, my voice still calm. You laughed at what he left me. You told me I got the trash. Because you did. Trevor shouted. An old garage in a dead neighborhood. You think that compares to this? I don't think it compares, I said quietly. I know it doesn't. And then I told him. I told him about the collection, about the paintings and antiques, about the appraisals and the specialists and the estimated value of $5 to $6 million. I watched his face go through stages: disbelief, shock, denial, and finally rage. You're lying, he said, but his voice wavered. I have the appraisal documents in my car. Gerald Timmons, if you want to verify. Your father spent 45 years building that collection. He left it to me because he knew exactly who you were, Trevor. He knew you'd take the flashy prize and never question whether there was more. He was right. Trevor grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. You're giving me half. Whatever that collection is worth, I'm entitled to half. I pulled my arm away. You're entitled to what you were given. The Meridian penthouse. That was your inheritance. Mine is mine. I'll sue. I'll contest the will. You'll lose, I said. The will is ironclad. Richard made sure of that. But please try. Take me to court. Let's have all your friends and business associates learn that your father trusted you with $2 million and gave his wife $5 million. Let's talk about what that says about who you are. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The social cost, the embarrassment, the admission that his father had valued his mother more. It would destroy the image he'd spent his life building. Get out, he said again, but the fight had gone out of his voice. Gladly. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button. Before the doors closed, I looked back at him one last time. Your father loved you enough to hope you'd be better than you are. I loved you enough to believe him. We were both wrong. The doors closed on his face, and I rode down feeling lighter than I had in months. The story should have ended there. Sweet revenge, lesson learned, fade to black. But life isn't a story, and revenge doesn't solve everything. It just opens new chapters. I sold most of the collection over the next 6 months. Gerald helped me find the right buyers, the right auction houses. Some pieces went to museums, others to private collectors. The money came in waves, $400,000 here, $800,000 there. By the time it was done, I'd netted just over $5.3 million after taxes and fees. I kept 3 pieces. The small painting of the barn that Richard had mentioned in his letter, his first purchase. A silver tea set that reminded me of my grandmother. And a landscape painting of a field in autumn, because it was beautiful and because I could. The rest, the life-changing amount, the fortune. I put into investments and trusts, set up with the help of a financial advisor who treated me like I had a brain. It felt surreal, seeing those numbers in my accounts. I could live comfortably for the rest of my life. Could travel, could give to charity, could do whatever I wanted. But first, I had to deal with Trevor. He didn't sue. That surprised me at first, until I learned from my lawyer that Amanda had left him. Apparently, learning that his mother was worth more than he was had been the final straw in a marriage that had been dying for years. She filed for divorce, asking for half of everything, including the Meridian penthouse. Trevor called me 2 months after our confrontation. I was in the garden. I'd hired someone to help me keep the house up, and the yard had never looked better, when my phone rang. Mom. His voice was different. Smaller. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Amanda's taking me for everything. She wants the penthouse. My lawyer says I'll probably have to sell it to pay her the settlement. I didn't say anything. Just waited. I was wondering if maybe you could help. A loan. Just temporary, until I get back on my feet. The audacity of it should have made me angry. Instead, I just felt tired. No. Mom, please. I'm your son. I know I said some things, but... You called me a pathetic old fool, I said quietly. You told me I got trash. You tried to force me to sell my home. You grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. I'd taken pictures of those bruises. Hadn't known why at the time, but they'd felt important somehow. I'm not giving you money, Trevor. So that's it? You're just going to let me lose everything? You're losing a penthouse in a divorce. That's not everything. That's life. Most people deal with much worse. I'm your son, he repeated, and now there was anger creeping back into his voice. Yes, I agreed. You are. And that's the only reason I haven't completely cut you out of my life. But being my son doesn't entitle you to my money, my help, or my forgiveness. You have to earn those things, Trevor. And so far, you haven't tried. He hung up. I stood in my garden, holding my phone, and wondered if I'd done the right thing. Was I being cruel? Was I supposed to help him anyway, because that's what mothers do? But then I remembered his face when he'd laughed at my inheritance. Remembered the contempt in his voice, the satisfaction when he'd thought I'd gotten nothing. And I knew that giving him money now would teach him nothing. Would change nothing. If you're a parent, you understand this particular agony. The pain of loving someone who doesn't love you back, not really. The guilt of wondering if you failed somehow, if you could have raised them better. The anger at the person they became despite everything you gave them. I saw Trevor one more time, 6 months after that phone call. It was at a coffee shop, completely by accident. I was meeting an old friend from my teaching days, and he was there with a woman I didn't recognize. Not Amanda. Someone younger, eager-looking. He was dressed well, as always, but something was different. The confidence was forced now, brittle. He saw me. Our eyes met across the cafe. I watched him make a decision, watched him lean over and say something to his companion. Then he stood and walked over to my table. Mom. Trevor. He stood there awkwardly, hands in his pockets. You look good. Thank you. I wanted to apologize. For what I said. For how I acted. I studied his face, looking for sincerity. I found something, regret, maybe, or embarrassment. But not remorse. Not the kind of sorry that comes from understanding what you've done wrong. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I'm doing better now. Started a new development project. Got a new place, nothing like the Meridian, but it's good. Things are looking up. I'm glad. He shifted his weight. Maybe we could have dinner sometime? Start over. And there it was. The olive branch. The offer of reconciliation. The chance to be a family again. I thought about Richard's letter. About 41 years of marriage and all the things left unsaid. About my son's face when he'd called me pathetic. About the bruises on my arm. About the phone call asking for money. Maybe, I said. Not yes but not no. Call me in a few months. We'll see. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe relief. He nodded. Okay. Yeah. I'll do that. He walked back to his table. I watched him smile at his companion, watched him slip back into the confident performance he wore like armor. And I knew he probably wouldn't call. That this was the extent of his effort, this brief moment of discomfort, and when I didn't immediately forgive and forget, he'd go back to his life and tell himself I was the one being difficult. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll surprise me. Maybe in a few months or a few years, he'll call and we'll have that dinner and he'll have actually learned something. People can change. Not often, not easily, but it happens. I'm not holding my breath. My friend arrived, and we had coffee and caught up on 40 years of life. She asked about Trevor. Everyone always asks about the children, and I told her we were working through some things. It was easier than the truth. The truth was that I'd learned something in those months after Richard died, that you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. That being a mother doesn't mean being a doormat. That sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. I still live in the house Richard and I shared. It's too big for one person probably, but it's full of memories, good ones mostly. I had the kitchen remodeled, finally. Richard would have liked it. I hung the painting of the autumn field in the living room, where the light hits it just right in the mornings. I started volunteering at the local library, helping adults with literacy. Teaching again, after all these years. It feels good to be useful, to help people who actually want to learn. The old auto shop is still there on Industrial Boulevard. I had it cleaned up, renovated. Now it's a community workshop space, part art studio, part makerspace, part gathering place for the neighborhood. I named it Brennan's Place, after Richard. It doesn't make money, but it doesn't need to. It gives back to a neighborhood that's starting to come alive again. Sometimes I sit in the small office there, the one where I found Richard's letter, and I think about secrets. About the things we hide from the people we love, and why we hide them. Richard kept his collection secret because he wanted to give me something that was completely mine. Because he saw our son clearly and loved me enough to protect me from that clarity. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if he'd lived longer. If he would have told me about the collection eventually, or if he'd planned all along for me to find it after he was gone. If he'd hoped Trevor would be different, would prove him wrong somehow. But Richard was a practical man. He planned for the reality he saw, not the one he wished for. And in doing that, he gave me more than financial security. He gave me proof that I was valued, that my life and my sacrifices mattered. That I wasn't a pathetic old fool. I was a woman worth $5 million in carefully chosen treasures. The grandchildren are a complicated subject. Trevor's kids, Madison and Connor, 12 and 10 now, I haven't seen them much since the divorce. Amanda has custody, and she's not interested in maintaining connections to Trevor's family. I send birthday cards, Christmas presents. Sometimes I get thank you notes that might have been written by the kids or might have been written by Amanda. It's hard to tell. It breaks my heart, if I'm honest. They're innocent in all of this. But I'm also not going to force a relationship that isn't wanted. Maybe when they're older, they'll reach out. Maybe they won't. I can't control it, and I've learned that trying to control things you can't control is a waste of precious time. What I can control is how I spend my days, and who I am in the time I have left. 63 isn't old anymore. I could have 20 years, 30 if I'm lucky. I'm not going to spend them being bitter or waiting for apologies that might never come. I've traveled some. Took a trip to France last spring, saw the museums, ate the food, walked along the Seine like a tourist. Richard always wanted to go to Paris, but we never made the time. I scattered some of his ashes there by the river, and told him about the art I'd seen. Maybe he knew already. Maybe wherever he is, he's proud of me. Or maybe death is just death, and I was talking to wind and water. Either way, it felt right. I've made new friends. Women my age who are widowed or divorced or never married, who are figuring out who they are when they're not defined by relationships to other people. We have dinner parties, book clubs, garden tours. Simple things, but things that are mine, that I choose. The money sits in accounts, growing quietly. I live off the interest and distributions, and it's more than enough. Sometimes I donate to causes Richard would have liked, veterans organizations, manufacturing education programs. Sometimes I give to things that are just mine, women's shelters, literacy programs, arts education for kids who wouldn't otherwise have access. I set up a trust for Madison and Connor, Trevor's kids. They'll get it when they turn 25, enough to help them start their lives without the kind of debt that cripples you. Trevor doesn't know about it. It's not for him, it's for them. Richard's grandchildren, my grandchildren, innocent kids who deserve a chance. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe I should cut all ties, protect my money, be as cold as Trevor was to me. But I'm not Trevor. I'm not him, and I don't want to be. The point of all this, the inheritance, the revenge, the confrontation, wasn't to become hard and bitter. It was to reclaim my worth. And I have. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things went with Trevor. If I wish I'd handled it differently, been softer, more forgiving, more motherly. The answer is complicated. I regret that my son became the kind of man who could look at his mother with contempt. I regret that Richard worked himself to exhaustion trying to give our child a good life, and that child learned all the wrong lessons. I regret 41 years of not knowing about the collection, about Richard's secret world, about the plans he was making. But do I regret standing up for myself? Refusing to be diminished? Letting Trevor face consequences? No. Not for a second. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you. Thank you for listening to an old woman work through her pain and her anger and her complicated love. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Real stories about real people who refuse to stay down when life knocked them over. Because here's what I've learned, what I want you to understand if you take nothing else from this: your worth isn't determined by how other people treat you. It isn't measured in the contempt of your children or the secrets of your spouse or the expectations of society. Your worth is inherent. It's in the choices you make, the boundaries you set, the life you build for yourself. It's in knowing when to forgive and when to walk away, when to fight and when to let go. Richard left me a decrepit auto shop. But what he really left me was permission. Permission to be more than I'd been allowed to be for 41 years. Permission to be powerful, to be wealthy, to be someone who didn't need anyone's approval or validation. I'm 63 years old. I'm a widow. I'm estranged from my only child. I'm a multimillionaire who lives alone in a suburban house with a remodeled kitchen and a beautiful autumn landscape painting in the living room. And I'm happy. Not every day. Not in every moment. Grief still hits me sometimes, missing Richard, missing the son I thought I had, missing the family I thought we were. But underneath the grief is something solid now. Something that wasn't there before. Self-respect. That's what Richard's decrepit auto shop gave me. That's what revenge, real revenge, actually looks like. Not hurting someone else but reclaiming yourself. Last week, I was at Brennan's place, the community workshop. A young woman was there, maybe 25, working on a painting. She was good, really good, but she kept apologizing for taking up space, for using materials, for being there at all. I sat down next to her. You don't have to apologize for existing, I told her. You don't have to make yourself small so other people feel big. She looked at me with wide eyes, and I saw myself at her age. Saw all the years I'd spent apologizing, accommodating, shrinking. How do you stop? She asked. You start by knowing what you're worth, I said. And then you refuse to accept anything less. She nodded slowly. And if people don't like it? I smiled. Then they don't. And that's their problem, not yours. I don't know if she understood. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Maybe she'll have to learn the hard way, like I did. But I planted the seed, and maybe that's enough. The leaves are turning now, autumn coming on strong. The field in my painting is the same colors as the trees outside my window. I sit in the living room in the mornings, drinking coffee from a new cup, I replaced the one I broke, and watching the light change. Richard's ashes are scattered in 3 places now, some in Paris, some in the backyard garden, some at the workshop on Industrial Boulevard. I talk to him sometimes, tell him about my day, about Trevor, about the grandchildren I don't see. I imagine he's listening. I imagine he's proud. Or maybe I'm just talking to myself, and that's okay too. Because I like who I'm talking to now. I like who I've become in the year since Richard died and left me that decrepit auto shop. I'm Dorothy Brennan. I'm 63 years old. I'm worth $5.3 million, but more importantly, I'm worth my own respect. I'm worth my own love. I'm worth my own time and energy and care. And if my son ever figures out what he lost when he called me a pathetic old fool, I'll be here. Not waiting, but here. Living my life, helping my community, being myself without apology. The door is open. But he has to walk through it. And if he doesn't? Well, I'll be okay. More than okay. I'll be free. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or discarded or told you weren't enough, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Your story matters. Your worth matters. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to be diminished. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about people who found their strength in the darkest moments, who reclaimed their power, who refused to stay down. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are not what people say you are. You are what you choose to be. Now go choose yourself.